Cool. Shall we just start in any way? Cool. Yeah, I guess people will be watching the recording anyway. Um, cool. Let's just finish it. So I guess last we've been talking about some of the other challenges. I do think I have a slides talking about these challenges. Yeah. So we talk about like representation to start from, like those are the lowest like fundamental features. And then we talk about multimodality that, some of these symbolic music generation system just read the scores, which is weird that it never listen. And then if you look at those like audio model, they just listen and they don't sort of you never know whether they actually understand the music, like understand whether there's some sheet music behind or there any music theory. So we are pretty much left in the unknown where whether these models are actually doing the thing that we want them to be doing. And so that's something, multimodality could help, but also think about, inputs or, controls for these Gen AI system that, text is sort of the most constrained mode of operating with these models. So think about, video, image, visual inputs, but also, potentially body, human gestures, body motions, but also maybe potentially EEG states, but all sort of different inputs. And then we talk about usability and personalization, usability basically the end, what we want is something that people can sort of misuse. So to start with, we sort of need it to be sort of like integrate into the creative workflow, but that doesn't, the story doesn't end there. We want it to be part of it because we sort of want to misuse it. So that, if that's something we are familiar with, then we can sort of like try to break it. And so that's, I guess, that's sort of the thing that I agree. A lot about this is that we should have these tools that can be misused, and that's when interesting thing will happen. And that's something we should strive to pursue in these AI models, so that these tools can be universally available for artists to think about different way to break it, I guess. So that's the first thing I usually do when I do something. I guess it's just to send to someone and see if they can break it. Whenever someone break it, interesting thing happens, and you will have new ideas of how to improve it, but also maybe it just lead to something totally new for your models. And then we talk about personalization. This is very early stage. So, we talk a little bit about it in class, can we sort of like fine tune it with our own model, with our own data? That's the least sort of like form of personalization. But think about it, what are the framework, what are the, ways people want to personalize these models. So, potentially through fine tuning with live inputs. So think about, before a concert, then you just do something so that you can tune this model, or, think about an installation. Someone comes here and then they can sort of like interact with these models, and these model will can get some sort of like personalization to your style. Then there will be something that, will sort of like unlock a more interesting, application. And also, overfitting, we typically don't like it in machine learning, but that's also something interesting to think about, is sort of like distortion in guitar. It's like, well, maybe overfitting is another way of, new music expression. We shouldn't be sort of like thinking it in a machine learning way, or thinking in the loss function perspective. If it could bring us to some new interesting expression or new avenue of musical expression, then we should embrace it. But the challenge here is that how can we make it more sort of like predictable but unpredictable at the same time? You should find a balance. And then we talk about this personalized text and music generation. This is like a minimum form. of what personalization could be. But basically, you can add your own style or own concept into the system. So S star would be sort of like the new concept that you add to the system. Oops. Cool. And so the last thing I want to talk about here is about the creativity. So last week, no, on Monday, we stopped here. So works of art make rules. Rules do not make works of art. So I guess that's sort of the thing about machine learning models. So I coded this like the curse of machine learning. So AI is only as good as the data it learns from. So this is sort of like the constraint of the current AI. I mean, to be more precise, this is sort of like data-driven AI. It's only as good as the data it learns from. So we are sort of like having these machine learning models that are trained to approximate some distribution in its, the formal formulation. If we don't do something else, then pretty much we are constrained by the data that it learned from. And so, this seems to contradict the idea of creativity that requires the ability to extrapolate and think out of the box. So, this is sort of like the curse of machine learning. So whenever you think about machine learning and creativity, they have that, conflicting interests. And whenever people look at these models, look at these Gen AI model, it does appear to have some sort of, creativity, but still mostly what it's doing is, within the data distribution, try to figure it out sort of like new gap from the collective human knowledge. Maybe that's not something new, but for you, that might be something new. So can AI ever be creative? There's this curse. But there's some way out. So this is one of the example that you should talk about. This is one thing about creative adversarial network. So this is sort of like similar to generative adversarial network. Just to recall that generative adversarial network is that you are creating that competition game between your generator and discriminator. So your generator wants to fool the discriminator to think that it is a real image that the generator is doing. And the discriminator want to, do the best job, sort of like as a police, to see whether this is real or fake. So for creative adversarial network, it does one thing more. It's, we still have this like art versus not art. That's the original GN thing. But now we have another thing that is art style classification. So this is something interesting. So this discriminator will optimize this art style classification to classify all the input image into different genre. So different painting styles. But now that's the goal of discriminator. For the generator, what it wants to do is to fool this classifier so that the classifier couldn't classify that thing the generator generate. So, to put it simply, encourage the model, the generator, to generate something that cannot be classified into existing styles, but still it's considered art. So that leads to something like this. These are the example generated images. So, you can code it, it's still art, but it's not being viewed by the discriminator as a specific style. So, these are generated images, and these are the best samples. And you can probably tell that, some of them are likely, this is likely Cubism, likely. This is more, countryside, and this might be more modern art. But still, we are now not generating those, centrally of these existing styles, but rather we want the model to be generating something at the boundary of these art forms or genres. So this is a creative adversarial network. So it's sort of like trying to break the curse that we sort of like instill this idea of being creative. And here, by being creative, it's not the typical way how people think about creativity, but now it's sort of like trying to be at the boundary, as close as possible to the boundary of existing styles, but still fall into that, it's still considered art. So sort of like, not totally conflicting objective, but still you instill some sort of like creativity and, extrapolation ability into your model. So this is creative adaptive network. Now Takui also made a drum version of this, but I forgot to make the slide. But anyway, there's someone trying to do this for drum samples so that you can create and drum beats. You can create a sort of like a new drum drum beats or whatever by using this model. And this is sort of like the first AI song contest. After that, people sort of like look into what are some of the things that AI can help. And this is like 5 years ago. So now likely it's more helpful. But anyway, there are certain category that can be helpful. For structure arrangement and instrument synthesis, and it's not so helpful. But there also be something in the borderline, and this landscape just keep changing. But again, I mean, what is creativity? So there's no formal definition, but there are some definitions. So creativity is the ability to come up with ideas and artifacts that are new, surprising, and valuable. And these are sort of the easier way to think about creativity. There are sort of like 3 types of creativity based on Baldwin's work. So combinatory creativity, that's just combining existing ideas and things into something new. So in this case, the circle and the star, and then you make something sort of like star based on the circles. And exploratory creativity is that it's exploring possibility within the domain. So, you have stars, then you can sort of like explore different variation of the stars. But finally, these are things that we consider, pure creativity for human, like transformative creativity is that just radically changing the definition and the new ideas that redefine a domain and applicable rules. So you definitely see that AI is good at combinatory creativity. So this is what I get, a Michigan space Wolverine. Are you ready to see what it's like? It's surprisingly good. This is image gen, and yeah, UN might be, submitting a lawsuit with that. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So it actually do the logo perfectly. Yeah. And it just seemed right. I mean, it's, sort of like some element. It's like sort of like combining the astronaut element and the football element together. And somehow it's here, it's outside. But anyway, I mean, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, but it mostly got.
But I-
Also, the
yeah.
Out of the bubble is the only weird thing. Everything
Yeah.
else looks perfect, basically.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I try a Michigan Wolverine in the space and it doesn't work. Somehow.
That was the entire prompt of just a Michigan space.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow.
That's impressive.
I think they likely have some safety guardrail somewhere. So I think like a space, because I try like a Michigan Wolverine in the space and it just generate Wolverine rather than Michigan one. So maybe there's something going on. And Michigan is not essentially, just your Michigan. But in this case, it's sort of like get the context sort of like correctly and, to see what's the most obvious way to combine these things. But anyway, you get a sense that, combinatory creativity is about these 3 components and try to sort of like selectively combining features from all 3 things. But transformative creativity it's much harder. Think about Duchamp, think about Picasso, think about Schoenberg and Cage on their influence into arts and music. We are so far away from that, and And I don't even think that, current AI paradigm can do this, because to do this, transformative by definition is that you should be sort of like contextualized and, being grounded in the current sort of like society so that you can think about what are the different way to look at it. And one of the biggest challenge for now for current AI is that these AI are not grounded by the sort of like, we call it like common sense or, a world model or an understanding or a contextualized understanding of what the world is it right now. And so without these, I mean, I don't think there's easy way we can imagine these AI to be this creative. And so by this definition, I think AI is still, so far away from anything that we consider the true sort of like creative or, genre defining creative work in this sense. But again, AI could help in some of the creativity or, at least as inspiration tool, then it doesn't, I mean, for AI researcher, definitely people want to see whether we can have a better AI that can actually do more creativity stuff. But on the other side, if you're not an AI researcher, then what you care is, whether these AI can help in whatever level of creativity. So one thing about John Cage's like 4 minutes and 33 seconds, this is like a direct quote. So people might have opinions on this piece, but they miss the point. There's no such thing as silence. So how does like Cage came up with this idea is actually sort of like grounded with his experience, sitting in this like silent room. I forgot the technical term again. Oh, I put it here. Anechoic chamber. So those room that has all the non-reflective panel installed, and it's sort of like pure silence. But in fact, if you are in those rooms, I think I was once there for some of the RF like radio frequency measurement. If you are alone in those room, you couldn't stand for 10 minutes. You will be crazy because you will hear your heartbeat.
Have you tried it? Have you tried
I
to do
didn't
that?
try for 10 minutes, but I think there are some YouTube channels doing that. If you can stay for an hour, then I will give you 1 million. Kind of like that. And I don't know what's the official record, but the thing is that it's not silent and you will hear any single movement of yourself. And so that's sort of, the inspiration and idea behind 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And then if you think about it, that's, can I do this? I mean, seemingly impossible because AI won't have that, embodied or a real life experience to have those all the sensory inputs, but also think about what's going on and can we sort of like redefine music in this sense. And so there's like fundamental challenge in the current AI paradigm. And it's not saying that we couldn't figure out a way to do it. Maybe, it's like think about deep learning 30, 40 years ago. No one will likely believe that it will happen this soon, but maybe something will happen. But these are some of the challenge that just fundamentally contradict to what we have. Cool. And sort of similarly, David Cope on the Emily Howell. So, people tell me that they don't hear soul in the music, but all these feeling that we get from listening of music are something we produce. It's not there in the notes. It comes from emotional insights in each of us. The music is just a trigger. And finally, I think I would just end this part with this, creative versus art. Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. So there's still a slight difference between creativity and art. You have all these creativity, you can get all sort of things. So think about, GN and MBA, and all these image gen models, you send a prompt and you get tens or hundreds or thousands of outputs, but at the end is human choosing the meaningful sort of like selection that sort of like serve your creative intention, and that's what we call art. So the idea is not just about having all those sort of like variety of outputs, but rather how you selectively choose the thing that makes sense and deliver your message. So this is from Scott Adams, who's the creator of what's his name? Dalbert, yeah. And very interesting. I mean, definitely check out this YouTube TED Talk, which is wonderful. So this is by Aaron Hertzman. He's now the sort of like, I think he's like senior VP at Adobe, overseeing like 50 people research team, doing all sort of like video, image, and audio generation. So the whole music team is under him. No. Sorry, I'm doing something wrong. No, he's overseeing the image generation part, not the audio part. Yeah, but anyway, you can check it out. Whoops. Cool. So to summarize, the 5 challenges, representation, multimodality, usability, personalization, and creativity. There's definitely a lot more, but these are just something that, immediately come up in my mind. How can we best represent music for machine learning? That's something likely we will have an answer in, I don't know, hopefully 3 or 5 years. Can AI learn to create music by listening to music rather than reading music? But also, think about Gen AI. Can we have other inputs to control these Gen AI system? How can AI music tools be integrated into an artist's, creative workflow so that we can use it in the way we used to use these tools, but at the same time to misuse these tools easily? Personalization, how can we make my personal AI music tools and creativity? How can AI ever be creative? How can AI augment human creativity? I don't think we can do this without folks coming up. So, just a recap, what is artificial intelligence? Systems that think like humans, systems that act like humans, systems that think rationally, or systems that act rationally. So, think about, do we care more about thinking or the action of, the internal working of AI, or the outcomes of the AI, or the behavior of AI? And on the x-axis is, does it has to be like human, or is just doing something, intelligent? So this is what we've done previously. I don't know, but did you change your thought on this? Who will remember? Yeah.
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 I mean, as of right now, I feel like the outcome is what matters more to me, just because I'm
Results.
yeah, at the end of the day, results are what matters. And I think also, like, in the creativity aspect, I don't care too much to see AI become like I would rather humans take on that frontier. Just because I like the idea of I think the creative adversarial network is cool just because it can maybe give you ideas of where to go.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't foresee it becoming super creative soon. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it just doing tasks that maybe like
Tedious.
Maybe are tedious, or maybe we can just gain inspiration.
Yeah.
Look at something in a different way that we might not have come up with.
Yeah, I think that's the way how it is right now. And people sometimes are overthinking about, AI being too creative and taking, human agency. But I think that's sort of like imaginary, and it's not so true. Other than, those startups, because they want to raise funding. So they have to brag about, AGI. But I think the general sense in the AI community is that, well, we are far away from AGI, but that could be something we pursue. But to be honest, in the reasonable reach is that we likely won't reach it. Maybe potentially just impossible to reach it. But if that's a goal, we can still make some progress. And that's why, in day one of AI, people are looking into sort of like generated music, because that's sort of the definition of some of the definition of artificial general intelligence. And it's not saying that that's our pure goal, but more like, that's the holy grail. And we want to move toward that. And at the same time, these AI technology will just move on. And you never know when we will be. And that's likely not the, sole goal of the whole sort of like AI community, but that's sort of like a long-term thing that drive how people move on. Yeah. And I guess we never know. We do have some statistics. Is that like our first class or second class? But anyway, when people still shows up. Anyway, so these are the statistics, and likely we never remember what we vote for. Yeah. So no one actually think it needs to behave like a human, which is interesting.
Could be a disadvantage. I would like to be able to choose if it behaves like human or not. Sometimes I would want like just completely raw, unhuman,
Yeah.
like completely uninspired from human stuff.
Yeah. Interesting.
Sometimes I do want human.
What scenarios would you want like
To be human?
versus non-human?
I don't know, sometimes maybe like design something, like you just want something that like. I don't know, maybe there's a scenario, just like you just want a completely unfiltered, unmodified way of thinking.
Yeah, I think and most product we have now is like non-human like. And but I mean human like, I would say, one specific example will be improvisational agent, or more controversial, like you want to revive some DC people, and maybe that's when the case you wanted to behave more like a human. So there are definitely certain aspects that people might want it to behave more like a human rather than being a tool that sort of just do the thing without having the sense of sort of like human thinking or inner working of human brain, even though we don't know how exactly it is. But that's sort of any sort of like explainability or some sort of transparency of the AI model. And what's relevant is that people always say these are black box model, but to be honest, our human brain is another big black box model. We don't know. So I guess that sort of is the fear, is that human still wants the agency, so that these AI tools shouldn't be considered as someone else that couldn't be controlled. And that's why people usually like these AI models to not behave like a human, because if they are becoming more human-like, there will be negative harms potentially, and we don't know whether we can do it, to be honest. Cool. So I also want to talk about some of the other things maybe of interest. So copyright. Definitely we should talk about copyright in a class about AI music, and especially at the stage of lots of Gen AI thing. But I guess the fundamental thing we should think about copyright is what's the purpose of copyright. And recently, if you're aware of, or maybe not, so Elon Musk and someone is trying to sort of like cancel all the copyright law. And so, copyright is not something that's, a very early concept. It actually happened in 70s. I mean, 17th century-ish. So, what's the purpose of copyright? So according to, Copyright Alliance, the primary purpose of copyright is to induce and reward authors. through the provision of property rights to create new works and to make those works available for the public to enjoy. So there are sort of like two potentially conflicting, but hopefully, harmonious objective. One is to, create incentives for the authors to create new work. But with that, the ultimate goal is so that the public can enjoy the work. So, the other quote is that, the theory is that by granting certain exclusive rights to creators that allow these creators to protect their creative work against theft, creators receive the benefit of economic rewards and the public receive the benefit of the creative works that might not otherwise be created or disseminated. So this is sort of like the two things. And, economic rewards extend beyond, simply just, monetary rewards, but also, reputation and, all sort of other format of benefits. But that idea of, incentivizing, creators to create work without the fear of, being just stolen or, not getting some reward in some format. But also the reason why we have this law is that the public will receive the benefit of doing this so that, more people can create more art. So this is like Paul McCartney on AI and copyright. If I click it, likely we will get ads. Let me see.
Not least for Beatles legend Sir Paul McCartney, and he reckons it's a threat they just shouldn't have to bear. Paul, as computers become more and more sophisticated and suck in more and more content that humans have created, the government's got a big decision to take about whether they protect the copyright of musicians, actors, artists. What are you worried about?
Just that. Just worried about the copyrights not being protected. Because if it gets a bit like the Wild West, then the people who created these copyrights don't benefit. And I think that takes away a lot of incentive, because when we were kids in Liverpool, we found a job that we loved, but it also paid the bills. So it allowed us to be creative, more and more creative, go out in the world and bring joy to people and stuff. So it allowed us to do that. I think if you take that away and they take the incentive away by not protecting the copyrights, I think it'd be a shame. And I think you'd see a loss of creativity, which is a great pity, because that's what brings so much joy to the work.
The Beatles was about music, but also about being able to put food on the table and pay the bills as a young man. What do you think the risk is for the next generation of musicians coming through?
So, for instance, you get young guys, girls, coming up and they write a beautiful song and they don't own it and they don't have anything to do with it. And anyone who wants can just rip it off. I mean, the truth is the money's going somewhere. And it gets on the streaming platforms, somebody's getting it, and it should be the person who created it. It shouldn't just be some tech giant somewhere. Somebody's getting paid. So why shouldn't it be the guy who sat down and wrote yesterday? It should be something to do with him.
And if you hadn't been...
Cool. So I guess that's sort of relevant to our discussion earlier about, what's the challenge here is that, currently it just doesn't seem like, these AI models are actually being part of the system, is that it's basically, getting all the revenue and those revenue doesn't flow back. And that's sort of the reason why it doesn't work. And, as Paul sort of like talk about, like the Spotify. At first, people are so furious about it is that, and sort of I think about the invention of recording. is that the first time recording was invented and people just play it, and you sort of like get all the revenue, and those revenue go into that company who make the recording device, but not the musician that play the music. And later people just figured out a way so that, you know, have this copyright law, and also, you know, recording is one of the biggest component in these copyright laws. So that's sort of the idea. And we are not yet sure how it will be in the future, but that's some of the thing we should think about. And, you know, copyright doesn't come for free. It actually started in 1790. That's when we have the first copyright law. And over the time, it just increased in the length of copyright law. So this figure at the x-axis is like year copyright term begin, and the y-axis is the time that the copyright can cover. So now we are somewhere at the 1998X. So now we have sort of like 105 years of copyright protection, mostly. And it was 75 years previously, and they extended it. So, you know, over time, at the beginning is 28 years. So this is like 14 years plus 14 years, and then 40-ish years, 55 years, and then 75 years. And now we have 95 years, and also 105 years. So, you know, copyright doesn't come for free. And so that's still an ongoing debate and process of how we can make it work. So, you know, I guess also we should also think about the purpose of copyright. So, you know, what about meme culture? Is that, you know, copyright in one sense is important to protect you know, artists creation, but at the same time think about meme culture. It's sort of, you know, borderline thing. It's that, well, you are sort of like infringing copyright, but at the same time, is it fair use? Is some, you know, transformative work from the original art? And how does that work if you're actually getting money from the meme you created, if you make it a product? So, but at the same time, we shouldn't be sort of like limiting ourselves. Is that, you know, think about the Disney case, is that no one ever dared to sort of like do anything about, you know, putting the Disney characters onto their you know, meme or work. But think about does that sort of like limit our creativity or, you know, creation space by having too strict copyright? So, you know, copyright is always a balance between the public interest, but also the artist's, you know, sort of like protecting, creating the incentives for the artists. And the balance is the key here. And, you know, think about portrait versus photography. This is sort of like controversial, but, you know, while photography displays, you know, realistic portraits, it also frees portrait painting into new art forms like impressionism and abstract arts. So, you know, think about the same for AI music, is that to some extent, if you are creating music that's so easy to be sort of like replicated by some AI model, does that mean that, you know, we should be going forward and think about, you know, some more, you know, creative art forms within the music domain? So it will sort of also challenge ourselves what music is, but at the same time, you know, think about whether, you know, getting these cliche music is what we want. And, you know, that sort of, all these models are, you know, sort of like trend on you know, stock music, and not saying, you know, stock music is not high quality. Some of them are, you know, high quality, but they sort of like are being built or being composed to serve some, you know, functional descriptive purpose, or maybe just become to be cliche. So that's sort of like challenge ourselves about what music is in the long run. And, you know, will AI music raise the collective standards of music for the public? And what do you think?
I
maybe.
think so. I mean, I've already heard the insult before that, you know, this music sounds AI generated. So I mean, I think so, just because, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, also, it's interesting because I think about that graphic that we saw a couple lectures ago, where it was like the amount of like how people view music and a bunch of people that like, you know, could do without it or whatever. And so I think there might be like a sizable portion of the population that, you know, that AI music would appeal to, but I think, you know, for necessarily the people that are, without sounding too pretentious, like more tapped in, it will just allow people or force people to just kind of be more creative and
Yeah.
make better music, probably.
Yeah.
Because if your music sounds like it can be replicated by AI, if we're going off the standard that AI is not super creative right now, that means it's sounding a lot like what's out there already.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
It's like AI itself is not pushing the standard of music. Because it's not, so far at least, it hasn't created like
Create like a
crazy,
lower bar.
Yeah.
it adds so much at the floor,
Mhm.
like the medium to like to the bottom,
Yeah.
that now there's the percentage of low quality is a lot. The saturation
Easy.
of low
Yeah,
quality is
yeah.
so much more that the floor gets increased.
Yeah.
And it's not that like A is creating good music, and because of that, it's pushing up the standard. It's like pushing it up from below, not from like up top.
Yeah. It's a little like, you know, forcing people to move a bit, you know, into a higher standard. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this definitely will happen. And, you know, think about, you know, sort of like ChatGPT versus writing. If nowadays you're writing something very shitty and, you know, or, you know, if you write something without much care, then it's people will be like, is this, you know, written by ChatGPT? Did you actually pay a lot of attention into making it flow naturally? So that's sort of the same thing happening in different fields. Cool. I also want to mention this like fairly trend. So, you know, don't be so, you know, still be a little bit optimistic of the future. You know, Fairly Trend is a company that's doing this, you know, L certification. So they do this certification with, you know, models and company and product that, you know, all of the training data used for the models being certified must fall into one of the following categories. So, you know, you have to be explicitly provided to the model developer for the purpose of being used as training data. So explicit permission. And otherwise, it has to be open license, public domain globally, and also otherwise, you know, fully owned by the model developer. So these are some of the companies that are at least making sure all their training data are properly licensed, fairly licensed. So these are some of the companies, and you know, those are not the big names that you see constantly, you know, in news, but these are companies that are actually working carefully on making sure they are working in the right way that actually get explicit permission. And these are some of the other products and models. So they do, you know, license for companies, the whole companies. If that companies have several products, all their products has to be in that way. These are, you know, more like a specific product for the company. I think the most famous one likely is the Boomi, has been there for a while. So, you know, things we should think about is, you know, how does AI generated music compare to other, you know, industry disrupting technology, like, as I said, you know, recording. When recording happened, all these copyright law sort of like mark the, you know, inception of all these copyright laws, because, you know, it doesn't seem fair if these revenue just fall into sort of like recording device makers. It's sort of think about, you know, streaming for Spotify, or, you know, for, you know, nowadays AI music for Suno. Should these company be the you know, the end, you know, ending point of these revenue, or rather it should just flow through that, but distribute it to whoever create those content, music, images, you know, video, films, whatever. And also, think about music sampling. This has been there for years, and still there are so many, debate on this, and there are also lots of, law cases on music sampling. So just that, Gen AI becomes so universally available, and it becomes sort of like a flood into the law landscape. So that's why it become a huge issue now. And this model training justify fair use. From what I understand, I think in general, on the legal perspective, at least from what we have currently, model training usually likely justify fair use by the current definition. So just training your model on these copyright material is likely fall into fair use. But that doesn't mean that your output model can be redistributed to someone to use, because that's like two different behaviors. So you can train it, you can use it your own. I mean, no one will likely care. Those likely justify for fair use. But if you want to redistribute this, a model to someone else, then now one of the legal cases that are challenging whether this model has internally turned some of the original training data into a different format and store in the weights of those neural network. And that's one thing still debatable. From my understanding of AI, that's likely not what's being done in those model weights. But in some sense, these model can be think about, considered as a derivative of your training data. Then that become the whole, law cases is about. And that's something we should think about. And finally, that's just like that, is a music gen AI model a derivative of its training data set? And finally, can a music gen AI model reproduce a song in its training data set? And that's sort of like the current legal debate is on. And, from the technical perspective, you might have different opinion, and, maybe there's probability is just, less than 10 to the negative, I don't know, 20. But if there is a chance that, these training data is being sort of like stored in your model weights, then, well, it's there. And by the current definition of copyright, it's a derivative or it's training data set. So that's sort of, how complex this thing is. So very interesting. I mean, this is nice. I actually watched it last week and I learned a lot from that. So how will the law handle generative AI? So this is a really nice forum. There are several different forums online. This is one of the best that I find very fruitful. We still have some time. I will just quickly go over some of the other things. So ethical consideration, ethics versus laws is that ethics is doing more than law requires and less than the law allows. So, doing something legally doesn't mean that you're doing something ethically. So this is like worldwide independent network. There are principles for Gen AI. So worldwide independent network is the independent music, sort of like ally on the world. So basically, there are many independent music network, independent music sort of like companies or organizations across the globe. So these are some of their, their 5 principles, basically, prioritizing a human-centered approach and safety for creators, fans, consumers, and the public. AI development is still subject to copyright and transparency as a fundamental element, and ethical AI development hand in hand with music. And there's also some papers talking about some of the ethical implications of music gen AI. I would just go through it. Loss of agency and authorship. That's something we discussed. Current AI, if it's just one click, what's the point? Do you actually own anything by clicking that button or, text prompting? A little bit better, but do you actually own that? And where is the human agency? So that's one of the fear, but also one of the constraint of current AI, that without much control, what's the point of doing this? And are you actually the creator? Where's you in this music that you generate? And creativity stifling, the repetitive nature of the music generation, and that by limiting the creative output to possibility of the model may result in a similar bound for human creativity. So this is another fear of this, is that, we can think about it like in a positive way, optimistic way, that, this will raise our, join human stand-up. But there could be another way, is that, people are so used to these music, and these music are, kind of low cost. Maybe in the end, it's sort of like bound our human creativity. And, predominance of Western bias, this is sort of nature of these data driven sort of like AI paradigm. And, we talk about in class that some of the data just doesn't fall into this, Western notation. And, there are different music traditions, but they are underrepresented in current music Gen AI. And so by doing this more and more with existing, data set available, and also all the existing infrastructure, we are sort of like reinforcing this Western bias in the field. And copyright infringement, definitely. And finally, cultural appropriation. This is a bit more indirect, is that, generating models make it easier to use content from marginalized cultures without any accompanying investment in and or engagement from the community. So, if there's some, specific genre or culture that you know little about, Gen AI sort of like create an easy way to bypass all the process and then just sort of like get something out from that. And it sort of let the contextualize, nuance of how it end up in that. So there are something specific for speech. So in this paper, phishing and fraud, misinformation, and deepfakes, that's, likely we see a lot. Security and privacy for speech, speech is important biometric data. So, not consensual use of biometric data. So, it's not just speech, but also, singing voice generation, or, TTS synthesizer. So, we have this homework, real or fake, and you heard some of the, Biden's voice, but some president's voice, but also, drag versus AI drag. So that's sort of the state of the art, and, there are some legal cases going on, but this is what we have for now. And, the Morgan Freeman example that we showed. But anyway, there are more reading to think about some of the bigger question in ethical implication of these, not just, Gen AI, but people have been talking about music information retrieval technology. These MIR technology are being widely used in some of the streaming platforms, but they are mostly, Western dominant, but also there are ethical concerns inside those. And, of course, diversity, it's mostly biased toward Western music. 1 minute left. Environment concern, you likely know. So, GPUs are crazy energy consumer. So I usually think about it, and it's actually like that. These GPUs are basically multiple, dryers that just blow in hot air and wasting a lot of, energy. And so this is like trending broom. This is like GPT-3-ish size model. So, GPT-3, though that's not open ChatGPT. ChatGPT is GPT 3.5, and now we are GPT-4. And soon I think GPT 4.1 is coming out. But anyway, this is like GPT-3, pre-ChatGPT era, and it used a household energy for 40 plus years. Or think about it the other way, 40 plus households for a year to train this model. And so, GPT-4 and something else is much, larger consumption of AI cluster. And, look at, XAI, but also Meta, they're building 100K GPU AI cluster. And they're competing in some sense. And all the companies are doing this in some sense. And, these energy consumption is becoming the fifth largest country in the world to consume the energy. So data center itself worldwide actually becoming more energy, consume more energy than Canada. That's surprising. And it will still grow. This is 2022, this is 2026 estimate, but it will still grow. Cultural concern, we sort of talk about it, global divide. There's not much, music from the global south. So the red are the dominant one, and the blues are underrepresented in our data set. So it will limit, global south creativity, economic disparities, reinforcement of, existing biases, and more, drastically cultural erosion. Cool. I will likely drop some of these. But if you have time, definitely check in this, reviving Korean Kurd music with AI, which is pretty cool. That they basically use AI technology to look at, one of the missing Kurd music. Just like there are one specific composition that's, partly done, and they want to revive it to see what's the, the actual composition is like. And for more positive thing, there are also robotic drum processes. And we also talk about, this anyone's knife that, you allow using AI technology to allow someone who has cerebral palsy, Kiwa Usami, to play on the stage with a whole orchestra.